August 12, 1843. A woman's scream shattered the silence of Willowbrook Plantation in South Carolina's Low Country. What Catherine Hargrove saw in her husband's private quarters triggered a scandal so devastating, newspapers refused to print details for 60 years. Within 3 days, over 300 citizens gathered in Beaufort's town square to witness a punishment so brutal it haunted witnesses forever. County records sealed until 1923 revealed a truth darker than any rumor, not just betrayal, but the deliberate destruction of a man's soul orchestrated by the one person who knew how to weaponize a community's rage. Beaufort, South Carolina in 1843 was a place of contradictions. Spanish moss hung from oaks like funeral shrouds. Beautiful yet suffocating air carried salt marsh and magnolia sweetness. Masking decay, fortunes rose from fields worked by enslaved hands. White columned mansions competed for dominance. The Hargrove family stood at the pinnacle. Edmund Hargrove, 35, inherited Willowbrook Plantation in 1836, 3,000 acres with a Greek Revival mansion completed in 1838, crystal chandeliers from France, heart pine floors. Seamless Edmund was the ideal Southern gentleman, tall, dark-haired, broad-shouldered from riding, impeccably dressed with the measured cadence of old money. He served on the town council as church deacon, known as a fair master, meaning he whipped his slaves less often than neighbors. But Edmund harbored a secret that would destroy everything. Catherine Peaton married Edmund in 1837, a union arranged to strengthen two Charleston families. She was beautiful, pale skin, dark hair, corseted waist, educated in French piano watercolors and household management. Their wedding at St. Michael's Church was the social event of the season. 400 guests called them a perfect couple, but 6 years later, no children. Whispers of pity and judgment followed. Catherine felt their weight, saw Edmund's mother's disappointment, knew her value diminished each childless year. She didn't understand why Edmund rarely came to her bed, why he seemed distant, his mind elsewhere. The truth lived in the east wing behind the main house in a room Edmund claimed was under renovation. It had a private entrance, simple furnishings, a large bed, heavy curtains, a lock, oil lamps casting soft light there. Edmund met Marcus Samuel and Daniel Marcus, 24, son of the head cook. Light-skinned, worked as Edmund's valet since 15. Intelligent, anticipating needs, moving like a shadow. Samuel, 26, stable worker, muscular, skilled with horses and leather, noticed by Edmund 3 years earlier. Daniel, 21, a house carpenter, slight with an artist's eye, rarely spoke, surviving through invisibility for 3 years. Edmund met them separately late at night, maintaining his public persona, church on Sundays. Business with efficiency, smiles at Catherine across dinner tables while secretly visiting the East Wing. These men had no choice. They were property summoned. They came. Refusal meant punishment. Sale, separation from family, survival required compliance. They received small privileges, better food, clothing, safety from field work, but their feelings were irrelevant secrets. However carefully guarded, eventually surfaced in a house where enslaved people moved through shadows, where Catherine lay awake listening to creaks, where jealousies simmered. Catherine noticed Edmund locking the east wing door, his cheerfulness after distant weeks. Marcus avoiding her gaze, Samuel in the garden late at night, Daniel with bruises on his neck. She pushed these thoughts away, the idea unthinkable. No Southern gentleman would commit such acts against God and law. But Catherine was no fool, raised to observe subtle signs. 6 years of whispers and a distant husband eroded her denial. On August 11, 1843, Catherine decided to know the truth after Edmund descended the servants' stairs. She followed, wrapped in a dark shawl, moving silently through the garden to the east wings ajar. Door light flickered within. She saw a furnished room, fine linens missing from her inventory. Edmund unclothed with Marcus Samuel and Daniel. Their intimacy practiced, familiar. Catherine stifled a scream, watched 30 seconds. Edmund's tenderness with Marcus Samuel's, familiar touch. Daniel's whispered words sparking Edmund's laugh emotions. She never received rage crystallized, not just betrayal or humiliation, but a calculating fury. She had given 6 years, endured judgment while Edmund lived his true life in secret. Catherine returned to her room, wrote 3 letters, one to Edmund's mother, one to Sheriff Charles Donor. One to Edmund detailing what she saw. She slid Edmund's letter under his door and waited at dawn. Edmund read it. His face-drained hands shook. Panic urged him to flee, but he was tied to Willowbrook. Denial was futile. Catherine had seen everything. Rage faded. To resignation, he knocked on her locked door. "Catherine, we must talk," her voice cold. "There's nothing to discuss." "Edmund, letters are sent. Sheriff Dunor arrives soon. Make peace with God. You'll have no peace in this world." Sheriff Dunor arrived at 7:30 with 2 deputies. Catherine met them. Calmly offered coffee, described the scene with precision. The sheriff, 60, gray-bearded, had known Edmund since childhood. His face darkened as he read her letter. Catherine led them to the East Wing. Unmade bed-burning lamps. Undeniable evidence. Dunor ordered Edmund's arrest and that of Marcus Samuel and Daniel. Edmund didn't resist, his face blank. As deputies shackled him, he looked at Catherine. "I hope you understand what you've done. This will destroy you too." She smiled coldly. "I know what I've done. I'll survive. Return to Charleston as the wronged wife. You'll be nothing, a cautionary tale." Marcus Samuel and Daniel were chained, their families watching in horror by noon. All 4 were in Beaufort jail by evening. The town. New whispers spread in shops, parlors, taverns. Edmund Hargrove, respected planter, caught in sodomy with 3 slaves, reported by his wife. The scandal dwarfed all else. The week before the trial felt suspended. Judge Howard Middleton, 68, a War of 1812 veteran known for strict law interpretation, presided. He had known Edmund signed his marriage license, now faced his destruction. South Carolina law defined sodomy as a crime against nature, punishable by death or lesser penalty. But death was implied. Edmund's wealth and status complicated matters. Executing him risked precedent for other elite men. Slaves faced harsher, quicker punishment. On August 15th, Middleton met with Sheriff Dunor, Prosecutor Richard Fellows, Mayor Thomas Pritchard, and 2 deacons. Catherine was excluded. Middleton proposed a public punishment for Edmund: 3 days in the pillory, dawn to dusk, with 20 lashes daily, scarring him permanently. He would witness the slaves' executions on the 3rd day. Death is too merciful, he said. Destroy his sole reputation, identity. Marcus Samuel and Daniel would hang beforehand as property who corrupted their master. Dunor objected. The slaves had no choice, but Middleton insisted. Law demanded their punishment to restore order. The men reluctantly agreed. Catherine learned of the plan through a clerk's indiscretion. She met Middleton, requesting simultaneous punishment. Marcus Samuel and Daniel watching Edmund's pillory and whipping, Edmund witnessing their executions on the final day. Middleton, struck by her cruelty, agreed justice should be complete. The trial began August 18, 1843. Courtroom packed, Edmund shackled, disheveled, Marcus Samuel and Daniel in a corner. Guarded, Catherine testified in a clear voice, detailing the East Wing scene. The courtroom silent, her words destroying Edmund's humanity. Defense attorney William Crawford suggested temporary insanity, but Catherine's testimony was unshakable. Edmund declined to testify. Marcus Samuel and Daniel were barred as slaves. Their guilt assumed. The jury deliberated 10 minutes, finding all guilty. Middleton sentenced Edmund to 3 days in the pillory with 20 daily lashes, and to witness the slaves' executions. Marcus Samuel and Daniel were sentenced to hang on the 3rd day. After Edmund's punishment, Daniel collapsed. Samuel clenched fists. Marcus looked at Edmund with pity. The courtroom erupted, sentence to begin at dawn. August 19th, Beaufort Square filled with over 300 people. Chairs for elites, others standing the pillory and whipping post. Freshly painted Edmund brought at dawn. Shirtless, bound, locked in the pillory, sunburned flies swarmed. Legs shook. Catherine watched from a distance. Marcus Samuel and Daniel, chained at the square's edge, watched too. At noon, Dunor delivered 20 lashes. Edmund gasped, then screamed, blood soaking his trousers. The crowd silent as excitement turned to discomfort. Edmund collapsed when released, tended by a doctor to ensure survival. The 2nd day repeated Edmund's back-scabbed wounds. Reopened, he screamed from the first lash. Catherine watched. Impassive whispers called her cruel, but understood her rage. The 3rd day drew the largest crowd, gallows erected. For the executions, Edmund, barely conscious, endured 20 more lashes, blood flowing freely. At 2 p.m. Marcus Samuel and Daniel climbed the gallows. Daniel rejected prayers. Speaking truth, we had no choice. Samuel accused the crowd of killing them to protect order. Marcus silently met Edmund's eyes. The executioner dropped the trapdoors, necks broke, bodies swung. Edmund wailed, a sound of anguish haunting witnesses. The bodies hung for an hour, then buried in unmarked graves. Edmund released at sunset, barely alive. Middleton told him to leave Beaufort. He was no longer welcome. 3 days later, he departed with minimal possessions. Willowbrook sold its slaves, dispersed. Catherine returned to Charleston as Peyton, claiming widowhood. She lived quietly, never remarrying. Her eyes hardened by what she orchestrated in 1897. Historian Thomas Bradford accessed sealed records. His 1899 article detailed the trial punishment and societal rigidity. It caused minor academic stir in 1923. Beaufort opened records. A newspaper article called it a historical curiosity, noting Catherine's death in 1902 at 87 and Edmund's unknown fate in 2015. A historical society placed a marker for Marcus, Samuel, and Daniel, acknowledging their unjust deaths. It omitted Edmund and Catherine, too complex for simple lessons. The scandal was no aberration, but a reflection of a society enforcing hierarchies through violence. Edmund was perpetrator and victim, abusing power while trapped by a society that forbade his truth. Catherine was victim and perpetrator, wronged yet cruel. Marcus, Samuel, and Daniel were pure victims, their deaths legal murder. The 347 witnesses were ordinary people upholding order through cruelty. The story reveals human nature's capacity for destruction. When enforcing social norms, their world is gone, but its echoes remain.